Join me in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I pray at this time that you can kind of push myself to the side. And Lord, for your words just to speak through, Lord. And that you challenge us, Lord, as we enter this time of stewardship to really rethink, Lord, our lives, give us perspective on all the blessings that you have given us, Lord. And help us to think, Lord, about how we're supposed to use those things. Bless the words that are spoken, but not only spoken, Lord, but also felt and heard. And in all ways, let's honor you, the risen Christ. Amen. So I was thinking about when I moved down here how much storage units are here in Florida or in Fort Myers. I mean, it's amazing. And even not quite 5 years now I've been here, but even the last 4.5+ years, how much even more storage units there are. I was talking with Michelle Hamstra. She's a frequent visitor of our church on Monday. They're renting out our facility. She's the director of the Fort Myers Children's Theater. You got to get to know her sometime. And she was talking about renting out our facility, and she was saying that typically they have their concerts out on Sanibel. I believe it's called the Strauss Theater. I could be wrong there. But anyway, I believe it's closing, she was saying, and that's turning into a storage unit. Even that, part of that place is turning into a storage unit. It's like, what is going on with all these storage units? But at the same time, I don't think it takes a genius to know why. I mean, the storage units, I mean, it's a huge industry in the U.S. In fact, there's 2.3 billion, that's with the B, square feet of storage in the U.S. It's like 83 square miles of junk outside of your house. And that number goes up every day. And you know, and the most interesting thing is, like before the 60s, this didn't even exist. And while human beings, we kind of struggle with accumulating things, I think our culture, we're really good at it. We kind of mastered the strategy of accumulating more. And I was thinking about why that is. Why are we so good at accumulating so much stuff? And just think about 100 years ago, what you had to do to get something. You had to put shoes on. You had to put clothes on. You had to get on your horse, get in your car. You had to go somewhere. Some folks, I'm calling myself out. Yes, young folks, we don't even know what cash is. And you got to have cash too. And think about now what it takes to purchase something. I mean, I think you should wear clothes. You don't have to necessarily have clothes on. You don't even have to get out of your house. You don't have to drive anywhere. I mean, you can click it on the computer and you can get something 24 hours later. I mean, we live in a world that's engineered for you to keep on accumulating and purchasing more. There's no wonder why we need more storage. But I think there's a deeper reason for that, though. I think it goes as simple as a math equation, 2 + 2. I think we bought into this equation that more means greater. More means greater. Now, we might not want to admit that, but every day we live like that. More is greater. I mean, just think about homes. I mean, homes now compared to 30 years ago are like 50% larger than homes were then. Think about the average size of a master bedroom closet now. I heard it's 10 by 10, a new house, 10 by 10. Keep in mind, that was like the size of a small bedroom back in the day. It's not just houses, though. Cars, SUVs, so we can carry our stuff. Bigger plates, bigger cups, bigger everything, it seems like. On a side note, think about Thanksgiving, the day we give thanks for all our stuff and people in our lives. What do we do the day afterward? Buy more stuff. We race on and we do it. And today, the next several weeks, I want to talk about, as we talk about stewardship, kind of talk about the opposite, about living simply. And we're going to look at Jesus. We're going to look at Jesus' teachings. We're in a lectionary scene, which means Luke's gospel. So we're going to take out stories from Luke. I'm going to talk about different stories in Luke's gospel. I want you to think about if you were one of Jesus' disciples and you heard these different stories. how would you interpret what he was saying? What's that relation, what Jesus is saying in relationship to our possessions or stuff? Is there something greater than just all the stuff we accumulate? So for the first story we're going to read, we're going to talk about a story that Jesus shared. It's about a couple folks. They come up to Jesus and they say, you need to settle this inheritance problem with my brother. And then Jesus, and then we hear this story. I'm going to go ahead and read it. Chapter 12, starting with verse 13. Someone from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus said to him, "Man, who appointed me as judge or referee between you and your brother?" Then Jesus said to them, "Watch out. Guard yourself against all kinds of greed. After all, one's life isn't determined by one's possessions, even when someone is very wealthy." Then he told them a parable. A certain rich man's land produced a bountiful crop. He said to himself, "What will I do? I have no place to store my harvest." Then he thought, "Here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. That's where I'll store all my grain and goods. I'll say to myself, you have stored up plenty of goods, enough for several years. I'll take and eat and drink and enjoy yourself." But then God said to him, "Fool, tonight you will die. Now who will get the things you have prepared for yourself? This is the way it will be for those who hoard things for themselves and aren't rich toward God." So now, like a lot of Jesus's stories, parables, there's a lot going on here. We can talk kind of about a lot of different things. But Jesus here in this story, he actually signifies what he wants us to be about. I mean, he's right off the bat, he's already talking about, life's more than just a bunch of greed. Life's more than just accumulating a bunch of possessions. There's more to life than this. In other words, more is not necessarily greater. Jesus just throws that right off the bat. And then to go on and to make his point, like good old Jesus Farm, he shares a story. And he says, there was this rich man whose land all of a sudden produced a bountiful crop. Now, if I was with Jesus in that crowd there, maybe if y'all are with Jesus in that crowd there, I would have kind of pulled Jesus aside for a second and say, Jesus, I don't want to say you messed up, but I wish you would have used a different word there. I wish you didn't say the word, rich there. And you know why? Because as soon as we hear the word rich, I think we kind of feel relieved. Well, Jesus must not be talking about me. He's talking about those people over there. Those folks need to hear what Jesus is saying. And we need, I think, to maybe define rich, how maybe Jesus defined it. However, how do we define rich? I think we kind of defined it as this like moving target. It's always something that we can't quite get because it's someone else, it's not us. It's always this moving target. So if you don't have a car, and the rich folks are people who have a car. If you have a car, the rich folks have a nice car. If you have a nice car, the rich folks have a new car. That's the rich folks. And we can say the same thing about money. Studies show this. You can read about studies like this, how much money or income is sufficient. One bracket will say, well, if I just had 15% more. The next bracket, well, if I just had 15% more. It's the same hamster wheel. It's the same moving target. We always define rich as something outside of our grasp. But that's not how Jesus would define it. For Jesus, I think, rich meant you had everything that you needed. That this guy had everything that he needed. In our story here, he had everything he could ever need. And then what do we find out? He had everything that he needed, and we find out that he gets more. That God blesses him with a little more than he needs. And by the way, we can almost pause and time out right there and say, do you have everything that you need, or do you have more than you can need? Do you have everything you need, or do you have more than you need? So this guy has a choice now. I have more than I need, so I have all that I need. Now I'm given more. what am I going to do? So his idea was to build a bigger barn. And by the way, side note, preachers, maybe y'all can tell me, why do you knock down the one barn and build it? Why do you just add a little more to the barn? Nonetheless, he tears down the one barn and builds another bigger one. I have to ask Fred Craddock. By the way, before we criticize this guy, though, I think this was somewhat wise. You know, he basically thought to save it and save it for the future. This was equivalent of like saving his money, basically. So essentially, he goes and saves it. It makes sense. Verse 19, we read, I'll say it to myself, you have stored up plenty of goods, enough for several years. Take it easy, eat, drink, and enjoy yourself. So essentially, building this bigger barn was like a retirement fund for him. He thought he could live a purposeful, a relaxing life, basically not having to worry about anything. He thought basically his stuff was his ticket to that kind of nice life. So far it makes sense. If you're around Jesus, you hear this story, you can kind of say, check, okay, that makes sense there. That's probably what most of us would do, is save it. That makes sense. But then Jesus twists the story, as good old Jesus farmed. Verse 21. Fool, tonight you will die. Now who will get the things you have prepared for yourself? And then the story just ends. These people are probably astonished. This is how maybe you are when you read this story. And I can't help but think about all these different questions about this story that Jesus says. But if I had to pinpoint it to one question, it would be, what makes this guy a fool? I mean, Jesus calls him a fool. What is it that made this guy foolish? I mean, he sort of did the responsible thing. He saved it. He didn't waste it. He wasn't like the prodigal son and ran off and used it for rock and roll and sex and stuff. But he was a wise guy. He did what he was supposed to do. He stored it. He saved it. It would provide him for a future. You know, a good financial advisor, they tell you the same thing. You save your income. You got extra amount. Don't spend it all. Save it for your kids. Save it for college. Save it for your own retirement. And yet what makes the story so radical is this guy didn't do anything ridiculous with his savings. He was wise. He saved it. So why is this man a fool? What makes him foolish? And I think our answer goes down to, I think what made him a fool, what Jesus wants us to see, is whether you save it or spend it, he misunderstood the purpose of all his stuff. See, the error on the man made was he was a fool because he thought his stuff was like the end rather than a means. And just like us, I wonder how often we think our stuff, our possessions, is the end rather than a means. I mean, if we just had enough money, we could be secure, we could be safe, we could be non-anxious, we could have a joy-filled life. And yet here's Jesus. It's not about spending it or saving it for later. The point's the same. You think that accumulating possessions is the goal. Instead, though, it's the means. See, instead, Jesus gives us a clue, I think, what our stuff is for. In verse 21, he says, this is the way it will be for those who hoard things for themselves and aren't rich toward God. See, I think the man missed the point that the blessings that was just a means to be rich towards God. Everything that he was given, it was so he could impact other people's lives. So he could do kingdom work. So he could help a child. So maybe he could help someone in need. And yet this guy died not being able to impact the kingdom in greater ways. Like he had anyone, he had the ability to, he had the means to, but yet he decided to play it too safe and just hold it to himself. Whereas he could have used what God blessed him with to impact lives. See, he had a lot, but he wasn't rich towards God. And then the story kind of ends with a question like, I mean, we really don't know how the man reacted to God when he found out that he was going to die. We don't know how the brothers reacted when they heard the story. We don't know how the other disciples might have reacted when they heard the story. But I think the purpose is, though, how are we going to react when we hear this story? How do we see our stuff? Is it an ends, or is it a means to do incredible things? So we can do things like our community garden out here in the church. So we can do things like having gifts for children who might not have gifts for Christmas. They'll have Thanksgiving baskets. What do we do with our time that God's blessed maybe some of you with good health in your retirement? Maybe to tutor a child. And I know it's chaotic over at Glad, and they can listen to this. It's chaotic there. But you go there and you spend time with a child and you read to them. That's what we're called to do. I think our answer to that question, how do we see our stuff as a means or end, our answer will determine whether we understand this life that Jesus calls us to live, or will we repeat the foolish mistake. See, the first principle of the kingdom is actually less is more. Our stuff is not an end, it's not the end, but a means. And when we know this, then our need to accumulate more goes down, and our capacity to make a difference goes up. We want less then. And we have more than to bless and to invest in the world and lives around us. And when we get that principle, we're a little closer to the life that Jesus wants us to live. Amen. At this time, I don't have my bulletin on me, but I believe our closing hymn is on 609, Take My Life. You're welcome to stand as we sing our closing hymn. Please note, if you'd like to be a member of this church, if you'd like someone just to pray with you, you're welcome to come up at the end of the last verse. Let us sing.